Hello from Seoul, my name is Victoria and I have been living in Korea for 5 years now. I'm obviously not Korean, I'm from Germany and I do videos about Korea, Korean culture, and there will also be some vlogs soon. So if you're interested in that, consider subscribing. 5 years. It certainly doesn't feel like 5 years. Sometimes it feels like I just came here yesterday. I arrived here on February 27th, so usually around that time of the year I always get a little bit retrospective. And I remember how I was sitting in the car on my way from the airport to the dormitory, and the airport is on a little island, so when we were crossing that long bridge that connects the airport island to the country, I thought, this must be Hangang. We were like 1 hour away from the city. Anyway, yeah, 5 years in Korea, that's the topic of today's video. One thing that happened in the last year is that my Korea bubble popped. So when I first came to Korea, I was super excited about everything and everything was new and you're in this honeymoon phase. It's like a new relationship, right? You see everything through rose-tinted glasses and have a great time, but eventually this phase passes, which is not bad because you can't be excited all the time. You also have to carry on with your life, right? But that definitely happened big time last year. I don't exactly know what triggered it. I guess the pandemic was also another factor. At some point, everything was just annoying me so much. It was quite frustrating, and then especially when you meet new people that just arrived here and they're like, oh my god, Korea is so exciting, and you think, I was like that too, and I wish I would be like that too. It doesn't mean that I got bitter or anything, I just really fell out of love with Korea. The entire fun was gone. So overcoming this Korea rut was something that I really needed to work on last year, and something that I'm still working on. And one thing that really helped me to overcome the situation was making friends. Even if you have the greatest partner and that person is your best friend and your partner in crime and buddy for everything, I still need friends. It also lifts a lot of pressure from your partner because then you don't expect that person to fulfill every need that you have. So, for example, Singon doesn't give a rat's ass about picnics. So I have my friends for that, and I, on the other hand, am not so interested in medieval armors and weapons, so he has his friends for that. Of course, there are still many things that we enjoy together. I prefer having very few but very close friends instead of having many acquaintances, but you also gotta start somewhere, and acquaintances will eventually become your friends. And I think it's very important to keep that in mind, because a difficulty that I notice when making new friends is that I always tend to compare the new people to my best friend back in Germany, and she's the coolest, and we've also known each other for 10 years. So of course, when you're meeting someone new, they won't live up to that expectations right from the start, and they don't have to, and that's okay. Because you will be friends eventually, you will learn about each other, you will have your own insiders at some point, and yeah, making friends definitely takes some effort, but it's totally worth it. And I can't stress enough how much my mental health improved since I made friends. When you meet new people, you always kind of have to start with, like, you know, Adam and Eve and explain your entire life story. And the beauty is that every relationship is unique in its own way. You still have your best friend back in your home country. That also puts a lot of pressure of friendships. As a foreigner who's not fluent in Korean yet, we always tend to make foreign friends. They're in a similar situation like you, and you can share all those foreigner problems that we're having here. But a really hard thing is that most of the foreigners leave at some point. Last March, my closest friend that I had at that time here left, and when a close friend leaves, it's also a little bit like a breakup. I mean, of course, we still talk, but we can't meet, we can't go to bookshops together, and yeah, it sucks. I really missed her, I still miss her, and putting yourself out there again and try to make new friends, knowing that they might leave at some point, it's not so easy. yeah, so after that I thought, you know, I don't need friends. I have Singer and Doggy, they are my best friends. But yeah, that didn't really work out for me. And after 2 months, Singer was like, can't you just go out and meet some friends? A regret that I have is that I had the mindset for a long time that I will stay here in Korea only for X amount of time and I don't need to make friends. Well, we already talked about that. And I don't need to learn Korean, and also I don't need to buy material things, all the house stuff or plants or things like that, because I will go back to Germany eventually anyways. But then usually things don't go as planned. Seunghoon and I were planning on leaving Korea 2 years ago, and obviously it didn't happen. And with the pandemic and everything, when I saw how bad Germany was managing, I really started to consider whether we want to go back. I mean, for now we don't want to. All the countries have their pros and cons, and who knows how long we will stay here. At this point I gave up on planning. Let's see what happens. So basically regrets won't take you anywhere, but taking action will. So last year I put myself out there and made some new friends. I'm really lucky to have such good friends here. I never thought it would be possible. I also started learning Korean again, finally. And learning Korean is really empowering. I feel like a functioning member of the society again. Almost, we're getting there. And lastly, I also think that it makes sense to invest in your environment, because we're spending a lot of time at home, and the argument that it's not permanent doesn't really make sense. And we're also living in the here and now, so might as well make the here and now as cozy and as nice as possible. Regrets is maybe not the right word. I don't really believe in regrets. I mean, I made some mistakes, but I also learned from it, so it wasn't for nothing, and maybe you can also learn from it. I think it's quite easy to feel homesick when you're stuck abroad during a pandemic. You know, sometimes I just miss the feeling of being normal, just being able to keep a low profile, because as a foreigner you just always stand out. There is no way around it. I guess in that regard wearing a mask helped. That's the silver lining here. When I get asked if I'm an English teacher for the 1 millionth time, yeah, not a fan. But then on the other hand, in Germany you always get catcalled, and that never happened to me here yet, so it's not all bad, I guess. Another thing that still annoys me is when Koreans talk about you in Korean. I guess they think you don't understand, but newsflash, I understand Korean a bit, and I get it. Even when I see a foreigner in our residential area here, that I am surprised and I think like, oh, a foreigner. But I don't walk up to them and ask if they're an English teacher. Koreans would never walk up to another Korean and ask what their job is. Anyway. To be honest, I'm a quite opinionated person, and I don't really like that about myself, so I'm trying to be a bit more open and listen more. Okay, I admit that I used to judge Korea boos, especially when I came here. I thought I'm not like all the other girls, which is such a toxic mindset, by the way. It's internalized misogyny. I didn't come here because I'm into K-pop. I came here because I'm interested in the culture and Korean design. So is that better? Does it make me a better person? No, of course not. And I get that others might have mixed feelings about that, but hear me out. So if Korea boos are interested in Korea and that motivates them to come here, then honestly, good for them. Good for the Korean economy, good for eliminating prejudice and xenophobia. I'm also a weeb, and I went to Japan and it was great. I had the best time. End of story. My intention wasn't to hurt or offend anyone. My point is just, it's 2021, and I think we can stop shaming Korea boos or generally labeling people like that. For the record, I'm not saying that objectifying a race or another person is okay, obviously. Okay, bye. I need to calm down now. By the way, the next video will be a vlog. Also, thanks a lot for the feedback on the previous video. That was really nice to read and it motivated me a lot. So a vlog is coming at you next week-ish. Have a good day and see you next time. Bye!